I'm your host, Finley Janes, and I'm excited to be here today at 10 Forward in downtown Greenfield for the series premiere of The Star Show. The show today is being recorded by Greenfield Community Television in front of a live audience. I'm excited to be on stage today, joined by some incredible cutting-edge Western Mass artists who are here to share their art as well as some conversations. So I'm gonna head back and join them now. Awesome. Welcome, everyone. I'm very happy to have you here today. I feel honored to be sharing a stage with you, and let's do this. Beautiful. So on stage today, we have the Loculus Collective. Let's give them a as well as Nemesister. And joining us, one part of Nemesister, Lena Abraham, today will also be presenting separately. So big round of applause for Lena as well. This is great. Beautiful. So I feel honored to be sharing this space with you all today. And I'm really excited to sit down and kind of dig into your art, your process, and also some bigger questions about community and art. I think today that we're gonna begin by turning towards Loculus. So Loculus, you are a dance collective, is that correct?
Yes.
Awesome. What does it mean to be a collective?
So originally, when we started in 2015, collective really was, we were 6 people. So it really was like a larger group of people collectively making decisions about where, when, what we performed, etc., and also published, which we can talk about later. But now it really is just Madison and I, and sometimes we invite other things and other people into the collective a bit more. But it is us. I don't know if you want to talk about why we kept that as part of our name.
So we're a dance collective, and we do have a one aspect of our work is being a publishing collective, and it felt important to us to kind of keep the name collective to question this idea of authorship. It's something that we kind of are always talking about as artists, kind of wanting to debunk this idea of like the one genius artist, and we think that ideas are it's hard to trace where ideas come from. There's lots of different roles that happen in the creation of something, so it feels important to make space with the word collective to allow for that kind of ebb and flow, and so that it's not just like Madison and Alana, and that potentially there's a future for the collective to grow and absorb new members or ideas or shed as it is. So it's kind of its own living organism.
Mm-hmm. So you're here today. Do you want to just kind of open up by telling us a little bit about what the Loculus Collective is and what you all do? Maybe how you came to be as well?
Yeah? Okay.
You want me to talk? Okay. So the way we came to be was we were 6 women, all 5 college dance department graduates. All of us shout out to the 5 college dance department. And all of us, in one way or another, were involved in DIY, punk, community in Western Mass, punk, noise, whatever else you want to say. Farming. DIY farming? I don't know. Sort of, actually.
No, a real
really. Thing. But we just were experiencing, a real lack of opportunity in the kind of codified, established dance community in Western Mass, specifically Northampton at the time, coming out of college, and then also in the DIY community being like, why isn't there more embodied performance? You know, you're all up there doing embodied things, but we're not talking about dance, we're not talking about embodiment. So we decided to start the dance collective sort of with that in mind. Did that answer?
Yeah, I think we wanted to, as people that were involved in DIY music scenes, we wanted to just see more dance as a part of that and have dance be in conversation with those things. Yeah, and amongst also what Alana said. Yeah.
So you're performing, you're movement artists, you're dancers. What would you say that you do? Like what would you say that your kind of main goal in making is between the two of you, and maybe other people as well as they come and go from the collective?
Okay.
It's changed a lot over the years. I think originally, back in the day, it was much more curatorial. It was like we put together events that spoke to the desire for kind of like cross-disciplinary conversation. I think where Madison and I have gone in terms of performative work is starting to introduce our own multidisciplinary practices into the performances we create together, so that those kind of cross-disciplinary dialogues are happening both in the like, we're about to perform in conversation with people of a different medium, but also inside of our performances, there's a lot of different stuff happening.
And I think an important part of something that's changed is the collective has become more just Alana and I, is how do you have two kind of solo practices in conversation with each other? That's kind of always the first question or thing in the room when we come together. We are often not together. We kind of have this long distance friendship. And so and very distinct solo practices. So what's it like to have those two in conversation with each other, in dialogue with each other? And increasingly kind of like bringing in like sound making, especially for Alana and also myself, but in conversation with movement is become more interesting and important and part of our practice lately.
Yeah. So today you're going to be performing a piece. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what the piece you're going to be performing is, and kind of how this piece came to be?
Yeah, so we've actually started thinking of our things we perform kind of in these cycles. We didn't really like set out with that idea of what we were going to do, but then we just kind of noticed something that was happening, and we named it and decided to follow that kind of thing that was happening. So we're kind of in this cycle, but what we mean by cycle is like certain materials or processes or ideas that are resonating with us that we kind of keep returning to, especially since we don't get to meet and work super often. It's nice to like return to something and keep digging into ideas and seeing what's there. So this performance that you'll see is kind of part of like this second cycle.
It's like the second performance in the second cycle.
2.2.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'll get into it a little bit. Like, it's pretty new. It's coming out of, we had a residency actually at the Northampton Center for the Arts this week. So it's been nice to have time to work. Yeah, so some of our things that we're thinking about with this performance are, what would you say? Okay. Well, yeah. Well, there's the material aspect of it, which is like light, sound, resonance, bodies. Also, this idea of looping, sound, and also movement, memory. You want to add anything?
One thing we really set out with in our residency was also, Madison's currently in graduate school, and so there's, way to go. It's a big deal. And in some of what she's doing in school, some of her classes, they're talking about ideas of editing and how you edit. And so she brought that into the room for this process. And then I kind of took it a step further and was like, okay, let's try and edit this movement the same way we edit and write together. So just process-wise, I think there's a really strong element of editing, revision, sort of collaborative editing, what that looks like.
Yeah, and just a phrase that's kind of popped up, which I like and is like a nice phrase, is just like the poetics of editing or poetics of erasure. Like when you have to edit something, what are you taking away? And how does that indicate what you might value? Or if you're taking something away, maybe you're taking away what you do value. So that kind of, we brought in conversations of that, especially since we have been writing together a lot. So that was kind of the starting point. Yeah.
Does this particular piece have a name yet? Or it's
Not yet. Not
still in
yet.
process? No, it's exciting. I'm very excited to see that this evening. So kind of walk me through what it looks like from when an idea for a piece kind of just comes into play all the way to when the piece is actually born. What does that process look like for you all? And I'm sure it's different at different times, but like for now.
Not as like a cop-out, but I kind of feel like the ideas for our work, they're like ancient or something. Like not in like a like ancient, I don't know. They're not like in an archaeological way, just in a like us, like the idea for this piece probably came about when we were making something 5 years ago. And I don't ever really see anything we do as like it has a start or an end point, which I think also plays into the like, why are we a collective? Like, why is like there is no sort of genesis moment. It is this sort of ongoing collective experience of time and ideas that just, yeah. But we do enter a space and say like, what are we gonna make for Thursday night? And that that really starts with like me being like, I'm living alone in this house at the beach, and I spend 30 minutes at least every single day messing around with my loop pedals and my microphone. And so I'm thinking about that constantly. Can we bring that back in? And Madison's like, I'm thinking a lot about editing and revision. Can we play with that? And then we just kind of run with it.
Yeah, I feel like it's more like we kind of dive back into a stream that's already there as opposed to like idea fruition. And also, I mean, part of, I don't know, we often are asked to perform or play shows before the thing exists. I mean, I think this is how a lot of artists work. You apply for the grant before you know what the fuck you're doing. You have the show before the pieces are actually made. So, I mean, I think that's also important to name the fact that, like, you have the thing and the deadline, and then you make the thing. And not that that's bad. It's just, like, how it is. And I'm also always interested in the kind of interplay of like idea, but then also we are in a room alone together and have to make a thing. And there's like lots of like practicalities or like someone's injured. And so kind of this interplay between like ideas and things we want to do and just being like, okay, I'm tired, or this is the limitations. And I think limitations can be really useful.
Yeah. Thank you. So I know before the show today, you were talking a little bit about what it means to be a dancer, a movement artist in an underground scene. And I know from my experience in the underground scene is that it's a scene that's very much dominated by sound art, music, visual art, and film. And it's something where I find that movement art is missing a lot. Is that something that you find as well?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of why we started our collective, and something that we talk about pretty much constantly. And I don't have like a clear answer for why, but yeah, our collective did start just wanting to see more movement-based art in underground scenes. Hold on, I want to think for a sec, so I'm going to pass the mic to you.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of reasons why that is, and maybe it's sort of a like chicken and egg situation of like trickle down versus trickle up of, you know, the reality that in underground scenes often that is a stepping stone to the like not underground scene, which is very true for like musicians, and that can happen, that there is this sort of moving up if you're interested in that. And that isn't necessarily where dancers get their like
Upward
big
mobility.
break, you know? So there's that, but then there's also the kind of like the lack of larger resources that if you look across the board at like arts funding, dance is pretty much always at the bottom of the like monetary funding list. It's true in academic spaces that like dance departments generally have less money. And so I think that there's, I don't know what that does to the underground space, but I think there is something about like dance as being kind of, there's like this intense gatekeeping of dance, and some of it is institutional and some of it is like the weird preciousness about the training, the like of having to train really hard to be a professional dancer, which I don't always buy. And then there's the logistics of like, we love dancing in this space a lot, but like this floor doesn't feel great for your body. Mm-hmm. And so and I'm okay with that, you know, like that's fine. And again, limitations, like we know what we're creating for. So we're not doing huge jumps and leaps and stuff where we're like risking injuring ourselves. But there is, I think for a lot of dancers, the sort of like logistical limitation of like, but I don't have a good floor, or I don't have this. There is this like preciousness about dance that I think we're both interested in kind of like busting through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, simultaneously, like people who make dance, I think often are in a pipeline that tells them that dance can only exist in certain places, which, not saying all dancers think that, obviously, but it's something that you're very much trained to think. And so then it's hard to see a space like this and be like, I could do something here. And also, oftentimes, people who are not trained as dancers, I think, feel like they don't know how to see or approach or interact with dance, which I also don't think. I think that if you have a body, you can understand something about dance. But there is something that people are taught that they don't know how to look at it.
Yeah, no, those are really, really interesting points to bring up. What do you think that underground scenes are missing by excluding or just like not having dance as part of them? It's a hard question. It's a hard question.
It's okay. I mean, I think that like as a society in general, we put so much weight on words and language, and I think that music doesn't always have to have words and language by any means, but the fact that movement-based work is fundamentally not about the spoken language or the written language, but about an embodied language, I think is really important. And I think it's an important thing to remember. And again, like Madison said, I think that like if you have a body, you can look at bodies doing things and understand something that's happening.
You all have a body.
Everyone has a body, and people have different relations. You know, that's not to like belittle that, because people have different relationships with body. People have like dissociative relationships with body, like, you know, and that's very real. But there is something, you know, you can take something from that and to kind of sink into and remember and be like reminded of the fact that words aren't always the thing that can best or most effectively communicate something. I think that is sometimes lacking in underground scenes.
And I think most good art does come from embodied experience. Even if you're painting, if you're crocheting, if you're making sound, that's coming from a embodied experience. And so I think dance just is another part of that, and that I think we all benefit from, like, I love watching films. Like, I learn how to make interesting dances by watching film. I'm curious how maybe like musicians can watch dance and take something about rhythm away from that. I look at paintings to think about writing. So it's just like, I think more dialogue is always, you can learn a lot from it.
Yeah. Oh, those are really great points. One last thing is, I know that you told me earlier that you are going to be coming out with a journal soon. That's part of what your collective does, is publish. You want to just give us a quick overview of what you're putting out?
Yeah, so the journal is live. It is, this is our first online journal. The first 2 volumes were in print. They were more of a cross between a zine and a chapbook. The first volume was funded in part by the Northampton Arts Council. Shout out.
We got that money for a book, not performance. Just to...
Yeah. Yeah, so we put out a call. We were like, hey, the internet exists. It's sometimes a terrible place. Sometimes it can be cool. So we put out a call for writing. We were interested in people dealing with this question of somatic practices, like, and specifically our question was around the fact that a lot of somatic practices that we have encountered are coming from this idea of like a white neutral body. And we were interested in people that are a part of communities that have somatic practices, and that could look like anything. That could look like gardening, that could like look like tattooing, that could look like sewing, or it being in a mosh pit, and just talking about those somatic practices in their community. And so that was our call. Did I do a good job kind of saying that? And so we got a lot of interesting different submissions from really all across the world. And we wanted to take advantage of an online platform really allowing us to include sound, include video, and kind of include interactive multimedia essays. I'll let you take over from there.
Just before we go, where, if viewers are interested in finding the journal, where should they look?
You can go to loculuscollective.com, and there's lots of stuff on that page, and then there is a tab that says journal on the top, and then a link to Map of Slight Askew, which is what the journal is called. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Big round of applause for the Loculus Collective. We're very lucky to have you here today. All right, beautiful. That was awesome. It's really exciting to hear your thoughts on all sorts of things. I'm going to turn now to Lena Abraham. So Lena, today you're going to be presenting on gay subtext in Xena the Warrior Princess, which is a television show, right? Mm-hmm. I'm talking to the mic. All right, Lena, first off, what is Xena Warrior Princess?
Well, Xena is a show from the 90s. It's funny because it's like, what even is a warrior princess? I don't know. Historically, I have no idea, actually. I was thinking about that today. But it's basically, it's like set in ancient Greece.
Okay.
And she's never existed in mythology, but she's like involved in all the mythology in the show. Mm-hmm. And it's like a spin-off of Hercules that they were making at the time. And I don't like that show, but I love Xena. I mean, I don't want to diss anything, but I just feel like, so it's like a kind of redemption arc kind of journey thing with her too, and a best friend. And what I talk about in this presentation is like, it's subtext, but it's also a love story of like, you can view it as best friends, but they are always, and throughout the show mentioned as soulmates. So that's kind of what, yeah.
Interesting. So what brought you to creating this presentation about gay subtext in that show?
Well, it's actually interesting because a friend had approached me, a friend who's here actually, which is cool, and was putting on this great event here that happened like a month or two ago. And another one that happened this month as well. That's called like Fireslide Chats, and it's like create a slideshow or a presentation, PowerPoint on anything, any topic of your choosing, and it could be like silly or weird or like super obscure, or like just whatever you're interested in, and to like pick your brain apart for people to see. And I knew that I wanted to do it when my friend had approached me, but I didn't know the topic right off the bat. But then later on that day, I was having a conversation with friends, and we were like sitting in this place. I don't want to say like we snuck into the Smith dining hall, but I guess I'm saying it. And we were having a conversation. Okay, yeah,
They've
maybe
got great
not.
food there.
But people were having this conversation about shows, and like really going into like shows that portray like gay relationships and stuff, and queerness in TV. And so I was like, of course, I'll do a presentation on my favorite on a show that's very important to me, Xena, and that's how that kind of came about.
Very cool. So, what's your relationship with the show originally? Because I know you have an extensive knowledge of the show. What's your relationship with the show?
It's kind of funny because I feel like I had known that I'd known friends who had watched it when they were kids, like Ibun here, and I'd never watched it as a kid, but I think I'd been interested in it, and I'd heard about the subtext in it, and so I was interested in starting to watch it. And it was like, at the time I was watching it, it was on Hulu, you know, so I was like getting through it, and I was like, this is a great show. And yeah, ever since then, I get really into watching TV and watching every episode and like researching a ton into it and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it became one of those things for me.
Very cool. Can you talk a minute on just like why queer and lesbian representation in TV and film is important to you?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the way people talk about Xena, it's like, I've definitely heard this, it's like definitely like it's not like totally like widely known, I guess, that it's like a portrayal of like it's widely known as like just subtext of a lesbian relationship, but it really was like, it did pave like a lot of the way for shows to portray lesbian characters and relationships. And the producers of the show were able to get away with, or the writers and creators like were able to get away with a lot with like, you know, the executives at like NBC or whatever, and really like pushing those boundaries of what they could include. And so even everyone in the show was like so on board with like that being like a relationship and like trying to see how far they could go with it. So I feel like it definitely opened up the way for like TV to portray that kind of thing.
Interesting. Cool. I'm going to open this up actually to you and the rest of the band. Is there a certain TV show that has had a big effect on your queerness? And
Oh, as a band?
no, as a
Wait, I thought you said
band.
open. Oh.
I'm going to open it up to your band. I was just going to ask
up
if anyone,
to me.
you as well as if anyone else in your band has an idea
yes,
about
yes.
see
a
what
film
you're
or
saying.
TV show.
Yes.
All right, boom.
So there's this show on, I think it was Teen Nick or the N, as it used to be called. called The South of Nowhere. I don't know if anyone remembers that show, but it was like very gay. The two main, or actually one of the main characters was bisexual, and it came out in like 2006, 7, and it was like a really big deal for me. And I just remember feeling like really excited for some reason, witnessing this and like, whoa, this is really cool and like kind of taboo and like I feel weird, but also really excited. And yeah, it was honestly pretty big for me, and realizing my own queerness, even though I didn't really realize it at that time. But yeah.
Totally.
I feel like I have like two answers, and my quick one is that like I've always been really into monstrosity, and I feel like how monsters are portrayed is usually very queer. But then also like my more concrete answer is like honestly just watching The L Word at like a very young age, and it's like a super problematic show, but like I remember like looking it up and it being like a secret kind of. And like being interested in like the relationships that they had, even though they could have made a way better show, but it still like, you know, affected me at a young age. So
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, you know, do you have one TV show you feel like that?
Well, I just feel like it's Xena for me. That's just it.
Beautiful. Big round of applause for Lena, and I'm really excited for this presentation. I have not seen it yet, so it's gonna be great. Oh, Boone said it's amazing.
Oh, I'm excited.
Oh, you're excited? Awesome. Oh, sure, yeah, that would be awesome.
Sure. Thank you.
Does anyone else want some water? I would love some water, thank you. Or do you have any TV shows, any gay TV shows out there? Xena, whoa, Xena.
We actually were talking about it before. That's why we got asked to do this. But part of the like, yes, we will do that. Is the last time we had a show here in the morning, we were talking about Xena.
Yes. Very important. Very important. Keep the queer TV coming, please. I don't know if anyone has been watching Sex Education. It's on Netflix, but if you haven't, the queer content is so sweet in that. Please go watch it. Just so many beautiful teen relationships. Very exciting. Cool. This is an awesome show today because we have such like a myriad of different vibes coming from all the different people presenting today. It's really cool to be able to span a bunch of genres. So this is great because we are going to turn to our final group, Nemesister. So yeah, let's hear from Nemesister. Nemesister, you are a fairly new band, but you've hit the ground running. And I'm really excited to be talking to you today. I know that you are just about to put out your first album. Is that true? Yes.
It's true.
When do you have an idea of when it will launch?
We are having our album release show here at 10 Forward on March 6th. With PussyVision, Feminine Aggression, and Attention. Very excited.
That's really exciting. Cool. All right. So first off, just tell me about the band in general. How did you all come together as a band, and also kind of what are your kind of grounding philosophies as a band?
Well, we all met, like, me and Aboon met in middle school, and we went to high school together, and also she transferred into Hampshire, and I met Lily at Hampshire, and we'd been in, like, 2 or 3 bands before this band, and me and Lily had been in, like, 2 other bands before this band, so being in this band all together with the 2 of them was very special for me. So I feel like it's definitely been, like, I've been at, like, a really great place, like, creatively with everybody, because, like, I feel so comfortable, and we've been friends for so long, so it's, like, it's definitely been a really cool experience for me in that sense.
Yeah, I feel like we all just started playing music because we're good friends. And
Because
just
we
wanted-
love each other.
Yeah, because we love each other. And then also kind of what Madison said about like, we knew that we wanted to play music together, but when that was happening was during a Boons last year at Hampshire. So what kind of happened was like, let's have a band and let's make music for her thesis project. So that was kind of like the beginnings of that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, our band really was a major component of my Div 3 thesis project at Hampshire College. And I really wanted to play music with these two. And I was having a really hard time figuring out what the hell I was going to do for my Div 3. And all of a sudden, I realized, like, hey, Boone, you play music, you're a drummer, and you sing, and you perform. Why don't you just do that with two of your best friends? And that happened, and we manifested it. And it's been a beautiful, magical journey. Yeah, so.
Very cool. Very cool. So your band, I know it has some like pretty specific elements that I don't see in a lot of other bands. One of that is that you have really specific aesthetics. So you're all actually in outfits a little bit. Everyone is in skeleton outfits.
Skeleton
Where
pants.
did the aesthetics that you bring into the spaces that you play come from?
So for my project, so my Div 3 project was really focusing on this specific deity in Haitian Vodou called Gede. And Gede is the spirit of the dead, and is the spirit of the ancestors, and is the spirit of sex, and of laughter and humor, and is kind of like a trickster and likes to hang out in graveyards and tell lewd jokes, and smokes, and parties, and drinks, and just really enjoys celebrating, and is also kind of a reminder for people to laugh at death, and to kind of see the cosmic joke of it all, of life. And I really wanted to invoke him into my work. And so a lot of the themes that we sing about and talk about in our performance comes from him and comes from Haitian Vodou and the African diaspora traditions and spirituality. It's not all of that, but a lot of it is based in those beliefs and practices. So when we perform, at the very beginning of the performance, we do the invocation song, and that is a way for us to call in the ancestors. And when I pour the libations, I pour water, and that is to call them in and to recognize that we are honoring them. And I just think that's really important, at least for me and for us, to reclaim that and to bring them into the space, and also to allow other people, which oftentimes doesn't happen in DIY spaces or punk spaces, to like ground yourself and also acknowledge your ancestors as well as the ancestors of this land, the land that we are on, because we don't do that, especially in punk spaces and DIY culture. That's not a thing, that's not talked about at all. So I thought it was super important to bring that into our work.
Very cool. Now I know another kind of special element of your music is the fact that each of your songs, they are standalone songs, but when I listen to them, it seems that they are woven into a larger story. Is that true? And is that something you can speak on?
Yeah. So as Boone said, like, death and Gede, but like we refer to death as death in our songs, is a character. We have like three main characters, basically. We have Death, we have Madam, and we have the Bitch. And they each have their own songs, but they're also referenced. They reference each other in songs. So like in Madam, for example, one of the lyrics is, "Oh, that bitch, you know that one in the other song. She will meet death, yet her blood will still flow." And it's like this kind of like prophetic, like referencing the bitch, but in Madam's song, and like their relationship to each other and what is going to happen in this story that we've created together. Yeah. So it's a story.
Yeah, it's one big epic.
Yeah, it's an
You want to
epic
tell the story?
Very cool. Yeah, I feel like what I like that's cool about it is like I feel like we try to weave into it like myths and storytelling in general, and also like at one point we have in like the Bitches song like kind of like a Greek chorus thing going on of like, you know, this monologue and then this like Greek chorus kind of echoing back, and like, yeah, so I feel like we try to put in those elements of storytelling and try to like make it feel like that's like it's all part of this like greater mythological story and an epic. And so, yeah, kind of like our own version of a concept album, maybe. But yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, they're all stories, but I also feel like they also are kind of like reflecting or trying to tell the audience something or convey a message to the audience. So for like the death song, you know, we're talking about, you know, death, it's from the perspective of death. And death is just like, the lyrics are just like, you know, time passes by, everybody dies, but I just want to laugh. And it's like, yeah, like death is, you know, we all are going to die. And, you know,
True.
it's about experience the now and like recognizing the now and like living here right now and not thinking about, you know, when is my time? Like, how am I going to die? And just kind of, you know, laughing at it all. Like, you know, we spend so much time and energy doing things and thinking about things. And then for what, you know?
Yeah.
You know, like we could all just die tomorrow. And then what, you know? Yeah.
Totally. So you're talking about, I heard you say earlier that like kind of just talking about ancestors or the ancestors of this land are things that are like pretty actively avoided in punk and in underground spaces in my personal experiences, and it sounds like also in y'all experiences. What do you think that you all bring to these underground art spaces and these punk spaces by bringing in spirituality? And would you call it spirituality?
Yeah,
we would call
it's
it
a ritual.
spirituality. Yeah.
Our performance is a ritual. We open and close with the same song. And I think that we bring a level of awareness that, you know, at least in my experience, a lot of other performers in bands do not bring to their performances. And I think it's really just like really cool that we are able to like insert ourselves in this way that other people are like, I had no idea that you could like do that, and like I'm feeling all of these emotions and like I'm feeling all these things, and it's like, yeah, you should. Like you shouldn't just go to a fucking punk show and feel nothing. You should feel something. And a lot of people feel something when we perform, and I think that shows that what we're doing is important and is effective, you know.
Very cool. All right, so I have one more question for you. I've heard a rumor. There's a Western Mass rumor going around that Nemesister brings spirits and possible hauntings into the spaces that they play.
Beware.
Can you speak to this? Is this a true rumor, and what do you have to say about it?
Someone came up to me at a house show and was like, I heard a rumor about your band. And I was like, what the hell are you even talking about? And then he told me, and I was like, I mean, yeah, but
true,
like,
and it's not true.
Yeah.
I think that also it's like this rumor paired with like the last question that you asked is also, and kind of what we've been talking about the entire time, is that there is, I guess, just like different cultural perspective and stuff like that with like Western ideals, but also like white American ideals of like death and ancestry and spirits and hauntings and stuff like that, that like I think was informed by that rumor of like not understanding and being scared because it's a scary thing and an unknown thing and something that you can't necessarily see. And so I think that's where the rumor actually started, where it was like people not understanding what we're actually doing because
Like we're summoning demons.
yeah, that they're because they're uncomfortable or it's not part of their upbringing or like
Which
whatever.
also is kind of, well, is racist, actually. Is this idea that African-derived religions are evil and dark, which is still very relevant today, unfortunately. And it's really sad when you hear stuff like that, that you're so afraid and confused that you just like have this warped idea when really people, my ancestors and like my family have been doing this stuff forever, literally forever, and there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing scary about it. So it's just a little kind of disheartening hearing about that, but also kind of funny too that we have this like rumor, like we are a coven.
we are.
You know, we're these witches like summoning spirits, which yeah, we are. So
Making waves.
I also wanted to say that, like, I feel like I also wanted to, like, say this thing just because I am someone who's terrified of ghosts. That, like, I just feel like it's
true.
Yeah. So, like, this band and doing this kind of ritual stuff is something that actually really soothes and makes me feel way more comfortable with the idea that these spirits are around. Because otherwise, I fill it with tons and tons of irrational thoughts of, like, you know, these really creepy looking faces that like looking like things you can't see looking at you. But like I feel like with this it's like, oh, like ancestors, like we're related. I have possibly these like protectors too, you know, and like yeah.
right, and that's like one of the main points. There are a lot of points that we want to make with our performance, but that's one of the main ones is that we all have ancestors. You know, every single one of us in this room have ancestors. So why are we so afraid of them? Why are we so terrified of connecting, making that connection and remembering them and honoring them, you know? And I just, you know, I think that we do a really good job of trying to like bring that into the space and remind people that it's okay. You know, it's all okay.
And there's some ancestors that you might feel more connected to than others, and that's okay too. But like there's something somewhere out there who might be looking out for you. I don't know. You never know.
Yeah. Beautiful. Let's give it up for Nemesister. Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. It feels really special to have you here, as well as everyone on stage, Loculus Collective. I had a question for Sarah. If we have time for a few more questions. Okay, beautiful, because I wanted to open it up. So, again, I feel completely honored to be on stage with all of these incredible artists, and I wanted to take some time while everyone is here on stage to ask some questions to the group and kind of just dig into how folks feel on a couple different topics. So the first thing that I was curious about is I've been thinking a lot about underground and like the underground scene, and I wanted to get everyone's opinion on, first off, how do you define the underground scene? What is underground art to you? And it's a big question, but I know that there might be some viewers in the audience that are unfamiliar with what the underground scene is or what underground art is, and so I wanted to bring it to you all to see what your definition is for yourselves.
I guess like the first two words that pop into my head are like community and accessibility, which can feel different for different people. Like not underground scenes are not always accessible to all the different types of people. But in comparison to only being able to play a show at like a legit venue where you would have to like have a manager represent you or like, you know, like go through all the shit to like get there. It's like you can just like text your friend or like text someone else and be like, hey, do you know of any houses I could play at or any venues like this that are like more open to having acts play, and not that you necessarily have to be like famous or have like had to achieve some arbitrary level of like accomplishment to be able to like show your art. I feel like that's underground to me.
Yeah.
Do you want one of these?
Oh, you don't even have a mic. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Here you go. You get that mic. Yeah. Yeah, I would love to hear, because I know that, and I also know, Loculus, you have played, and everyone here actually has played in both academic arenas as well as more underground arenas. And currently, I know, Madison, that you're in, maybe both of you are in the process of kind of jumping between those two spaces. Yeah, what is the difference between like a more academic space to make art versus in an underground space to you?
I mean, sometimes I think about like the underground. I don't think that all like DIY or underground artists are outsider artists by any means, but I do think about the sort of like just creating things because of a like need or just because you need to be creating things, not because of I need to get a degree or I need to get paid or, you know, that it's, and I do think of this work as my job. Like it is my profession. It is what I do, but it's not how I pay my bills. And so the drive to do it is not monetary. It's not about that. It's about this like need and desire to create things and to perform things and to be in space with other people, to be in community, to be accessing ancestry, to be accessing other non-human things. Like that kind of drive is a lot of how I think about it for myself, or why I think it's a place that my work can live.
Lena, how would you define like what makes something underground?
Well, I feel like I grew up in New York City, and so did Abun, and we were always going to shows together and had like bands in high school together, and we were playing at these underground venues, and there were lots of like underground all ages venues, and that felt really important because it was like this weird thing of like all the like legit venues were not all ages, while these like cool underground like places were all ages. And it was like when you'd think about like what kind of venue your parents would want you to go to, like which of those would you think? And it's like, well, I mean, I'm sure like there were tons of like venues in New York that were all ages as well. I definitely went to many shows in venues that were all ages, but whatever the point that I'm making is like what venues could we play at that were all ages? And there are these underground like DIY, like often like punk venues, and so all of them closed now. Yeah, that's a good point.
Well, that's the thing too, is that underground isn't always sustainable. I feel like all of the venues that we used to play out and go to are gone, long gone. So it's a question of like, how do we keep this going? How do we keep it alive? And that's really hard. It is really hard, but it's not impossible.
Yeah, I mean, I keep coming back to your definition of community, and I think that oftentimes, I mean, for lots of reasons, DIY spaces and communities kind of die, and part of that is like, I mean, part of that's like economy, and I also wonder if like, it's just, I mean, it's like these, like, it's like this, like how they talk about underground networks of trees or mushrooms. It seems like it's dying, but it's actually like, it pops up here and then it pops up there. And it's like, that was an image that just came to mind.
Beautiful.
That's a good
beautiful
yeah.
image. Because we do know that like while constantly, even in this area, underground venues, which are usually basements and barns and backyards and attics, and some venues that are just a little more accessible to community, is that they are constantly, everyone's fighting them being closed down. It's a constant thing, but it does seem that they are consistently, someone else is opening something up, and making sure that there's a space for people to experiment and make art.
Yeah, it's cool that like the tradition is not centered around like location or even just like one group of people. It's just and it's like changing in terms of like what what types of art is considered to fit into like that kind of thing as well. It's like always changing, and because different people are running these different things at different points in time.
I also think that kind of jumping on accessibility, to me, it's also about like spaces that I think that the importance of DIY and underground spaces is visibility too. Like in academic spaces, you have to make yourself visible in certain ways. You have whether that's like a couple of like letters on a page, or like a degree, or another kind of visibility or presentability or respectability. And I think that the importance of DIY and underground spaces is like letting more people be seen, letting more people be heard in this way where you don't have to like prove something. Yeah.
And I don't think that it's always this way, but the goal in my mind is that what goes along with that visibility and that needing to prove something is also a like takedown of ego. To also kind of circle back to this like like singular genius thing that I think there is a lot of ego in DIY communities. Don't get me wrong. I think that is like very much there, but it plays out in different ways. And in an ideal world, what is important about those spaces is the opportunity to for that to not be there a little bit, and to have it just not be like that.
Yes, yes, yes.
Care. Dare we say care?
Well, thank you all so much for sitting down for this conversation. I think that there's been some incredible things that have come up today, and I'm really, really excited to see everyone's performances. So, big round of applause for everyone on stage today. We are going to take a break, move around the set, and then Loculus will be performing.